Hi, this is Doug Knutzen from Plexus Corporation. In this episode of the Project Management Podcast, we'll leverage scheduling, execution, and team techniques to significantly increase speed on future projects.
Hello and welcome to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. I'm Cornelius Fichtner. We are coming to you live from the inspirational 2018 PMI Global Conference in Los Angeles. And I'm currently sitting here in room 411A together with Doug Knutzen. Hello, Doug. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Cornelius. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So the audience has just left. This is a beautiful, beautiful venue that they have given you. How was the presentation?
It was really fun. It is a wonderful venue. I was really happy to be in the theater, and the audience was great. I think we had about 200 people or so, and I think it was well received. I think it went very well.
Yeah, I came in at the tail end, and lots of questions came your way.
Yeah, there were a lot of questions, very insightful questions.
It's always a good sign.
Yeah, I think so.
In the opening, I said we're coming to you live from the inspirational 2018 PMI Global Conference. You chose the adjective inspirational. Why is it inspirational?
I think for two reasons. I think the two keynoters that we had this week, particularly the gentleman from the NFL, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his last name.
Neither can I.
Did the magician and had a great inspirational story there. He was just nothing short of fantastic. And I think today's speaker about the 5 generations and working through that, thought he was very inspirational too.
Yeah, I saw myself in those slides, definitely.
Yeah, they both did tremendously well.
Yeah. Your presentation is called Taking Your Projects to Breathtaking Speed. How did this presentation develop? Why are you talking on this topic?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really, over time, there were 2 projects that went really well, that were both under significant duress and both went really, really quickly. Really crazy speeds, and they had to do that because of the duress they were under. And when I went back and looked at it, they were from 2 different companies, and I thought there must be some correlations here. It's like doing a lessons learned, if you will. There must be some correlations that allow us to kind of see what were the correlations between these 2 projects, and that's what led to sort of the development of this specific talk.
Okay. Yeah, you said those 2 projects were under duress. What are some other, maybe more general reasons why we project managers are asked to go to breathtaking speed and take things to the next level?
Well, obviously, if you look at the triple constraint, we're often looking at, we've got a tight budget where we've got to conserve, or we've got schedule which we have to get done in a big hurry, right? Those are things that we're often faced with as project managers, and that's often why we end up having to go fast, right? Or we have a customer need that's specific and very demanding.
Mm-hmm. What was the specific duress that your projects were under?
So each of them was a different. Project number 1, which was a neurology device, there was an interim CEO that came in and said, the team has to do this in approximately half the time or you're going to be fired. And that is something that truly did happen and created a lot of duress for the team. So that would be number 1. For project number 2, the duress really was our customer came to us and said, hey, you've got competitors that will do this in 32 weeks. We need you to do it in less than that. And 31 weeks for a medical device is a very crazy timeline. And so it was a challenge. We felt that we could achieve that, and we went out and did it. But it was driven by customer requirements.
Yeah, my wife used to work in medical devices, so I do understand how there are externally driven dates like the FDA that could just take you months just waiting for them to turn around.
Right.
Yeah. So in the end, you found 6 correlations between the 2 projects, and we're going to talk about 4 today. So let me just go quickly through them so our listeners know what they are. Number 1 was planning. Number 2, rock star teams. Number 3, organizational alignment. Number 4, earned value management. Number 5, probabilistic decision making. And number 6, taking care of the details. Now, they say correlation is not causation. Right. So the fact that these 2 projects have these 6 correlations is not necessarily the reason why you were successful in going so fast. Do you feel that, no, in this case, correlation is causation? These are not just the correlations, but also the causes, the reasons why we were able to pull this off?
I think that's a really good question. I think when you look at it, the correlation is really about, these were the things that were in common, the correlations between the two projects that were reasons why they were successful. Certainly not the only reasons, because projects are complex, but they were some of the reasons why they were.
Okay. So the first one we want to talk about is number one, planning. How long did the planning phase take in these two projects? And by the way, just so you know, folks, this is a question that one of the attendees asked him at the end, and I figured, that's a good question. I better ask that one as well.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a very good question. I would say for both projects, we spent at least 2 weeks on planning, doing nothing but planning for each of the projects to ensure that we knew the full scope and make sure that we knew the breadth of all the tasks that we had to do before we could start doing the compression. Because as we pointed out in the talk, getting the full project plan laid out, and then from there, once we knew all the tasks, we could start to compress smartly with probability.
Mm. Often when you're asked to go really fast, there is a tendency to skip planning and just go to production.
Yes.
How did you avoid making that mistake?
Yeah, that happens all the time. And I think it was a conscious effort by both teams to say to the management team, hey, we need to plan this. It's sort of like the faster you want to go, the better the plan has to be. We've got to get a good plan so we know what we're facing, so we know what resources we're going to need and what it will take to really do it. Without a good plan, you're kind of operating in the dark. It's tough.
Were there any specific approaches that you took during planning in order to make this work?
Certainly, yeah. It's very typical, very conventional, what I would call the project startup workshop, where we would lay out all of the WBS, getting the deliverables out there, the tasks, very standard stuff, right? All the deliverables, all the tasks, durations, assignments, linkages, things like that, making sure that everything is there, and then getting team buy-in to ensure that the plan is really correct and complete.
Mm-hmm. What have you personally taken out of these two projects? Something that you now do on every single project in the planning phase?
I don't know if I would say take anything more out of those. It's been a technique that we've used over many years, and it's a well-known technique. So I don't know if there's anything new or different. Just the fact that you really want to do planning.
All right. We're moving on to the Rockstar team. How do you create a rockstar team? In my personal experience, I was usually told, here are the 3 people that work on your team. Go make it happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. And for both of these situations, because they were under duress and were such a significant shortening of the schedule, we were going to the organization and saying, look, if you want us to create this and make this happen, this is what we really need. It's sort of incumbent on the PM and the leadership team to say, we can't just take anybody who you have. This is a special circumstances, and these are the things that you're asking us to do. So to do that, this is what we're going to need. And so that's, we specifically asked for these. And for both teams, we were able to basically get hand-picked team members for the entire team.
Okay. Let me fast forward to nearly the end of your presentation here, because on the disclaimers and cautions, you have a statement that says, please don't tell your team you are shortening their projects by half. Why not? Because, they're probably clever enough to figure it out themselves.
Well, that quote from my presentation was really in regard to the audience here. Don't
tell your teams you're doing that.
Right. Don't go out and come back from PMI and say, hey,
now we're doing that. Okay.
Guess what I learned at PMI? We're going to shorten the project by half. Right. So.
All right. So same warning then to our listeners here. If you think, oh man, what Doug did really, that might work for us, don't tell your team that you're trying this on them.
Right. And the same as I explained to the audience here is that it was a very special set of circumstances for these two projects where, all these things lined up, and we asked the audience, these were these 6 correlations. How many in the audience have all 6? And nobody raised their hand, because it's a very special set of circumstances that happened that allowed these projects to go so quickly.
Okay. Rockstar Teams was the second. Planning was the first. Organizational alignment is next. Since both these instructions came from the top, we have to be shorter, I'm pretty sure you had good sponsorship.
We did. The organizational alignment was particularly good on both projects. So for project number 1, the interim CEO, although some might say, well, gee, the guy was a tyrant and, it was the bet your job opportunity kind of thing. He was smart enough to know that the team would not be successful without help. And so what he did was something I had never seen before, and that was he put in all of the managers' personal objectives for the year to make that project their number one objective. And so we had tremendous organizational alignment on project 1. For project number 2, similarly, because there were extensive cost penalties for the project for being late, the organization was very motivated to create, clearance on the tracks, if you will, to make sure that the project went forward unimpeded, and worked through the different functional groups to ensure that they knew that this project was coming and that they needed to be ready.
Mm-hmm. Even though you had all this great organizational alignment, were there any specific leadership challenges in regards to the team and bringing everybody on board that you found?
Not so much. One of the things we touched a little bit about the Rockstar team, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about that. They were the sole reason, not the sole reason, but certainly the most important reason that the projects were successful. When you've got, rock stars top to bottom, they were the main reason the projects succeeded. And so just within that, they just have a mindset of accomplishment and getting things done and things like that. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It does. Yeah.
So they're very special.
The people are what made it happen.
Absolutely.
And there was sort of we lead ourselves through this.
Right. They very much pulled together and were focused, both teams, very much so. I can't say enough good things about the teams because they were the key reason for success.
Okay. Earned value management is number 4 on your list. A very dry topic. Most people try to avoid it. How did earned value management help you to be faster? Because it takes a lot of effort to do it.
I think it's maybe a misconception that it takes a lot of effort. At least people that I work with are going to be laughing right now because they know I love earned value, and I talk about any chance I can. So, but I think it's one of the most powerful project tracking tools out there available, and so we definitely want to use it. And for my money, it will show you issues and problems early on, long before you'll see it anywhere else. And that's why I'm such a big advocate for it. And that really helped to ensure when you start to see yourself going off track, you can make corrections so that you don't have issues.
Mm-hmm. Number 5 is probabilistic decision making. What did you do there in particular?
In probabilistic decision making, both in the planning and in the execution, it's dealing with imperfect data and making decisions based on probability. I'll give you an example. One of the things that we talked about in execution was, how do you work 2 project phases in parallel? Well, you have to go with imperfect data. Take, for example, the questions that team members would be grappling with, like, well, I've got an enclosure that I need to make for this device, but how big is the circuit board? Well, we don't know. And the circuit board guy is saying, well, how big is the enclosure? Well, we don't know. So you work from the perspective of, when you're going fast, well, what's the probability that it's going to be 1 by 1 inch? Well, that's low. What's the probability that it's going to need to be 5 feet by 5 feet? Well, that's low. Okay. So
somewhere in between.
Right.
Yeah.
So you work in until you find that right curve. And it's like, yep, both people say this is about where it's going to be. And that's just a simple example of dealing with using probability to make decisions of you won't know absolutely, but you'll know from a probability standpoint that that'll probably work.
Mm-hmm. And you did the same for scheduling, right? You used probabilistic approaches to reduce your schedule.
That is correct. As we compress it, we talked about having the full plan, and then to compress the schedule, we would look at things like, and we would say, well, how close could we get to compressing, let's say, 2 tasks completely in parallel? And usually when you talk about fast tracking, which is what this is, all the literature says, well, you're going to be increasing risk. But how much risk are you really increasing, right? It's like chances are, even if you overlap them completely in parallel, you'll have some rework, but you'll still be further along than if you just left them as finished to start. And so you use probability to try to find the best level of compression.
And what I liked about that particular slide of yours is, yes, you showed you're fast-tracking them. They're right next to each other. And even though you added for both of these tasks rework at the end, you were done much sooner than if they had not been started in parallel.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. Last but not least, taking care of the details. What details are we talking about?
Well, in medical devices, which both these products were, there's a tremendous amount of technical detail in making sure that all the design reviews and the documentation for the FDA is all complete and well done, right? Even though you're moving fast, you still need to do all these things. We can't just avoid those. And so we had technical leaders who, along with, that were also rock stars, to ensure that they had the technical details along the way. That was their responsibility, to ensure all the technical details, all the design reviews, all the required documentation got done and effectively. And was their role. And that's sort of a separate path that runs in parallel with the development. They're making sure along the way that all the details are getting covered.
All right. So we found time to look at all 6. They were planning, rockstar teams, organizational alignment, earned value management, probabilistic decision-making, and taking care of the details. Are any of these more important than the others?
I would say certainly the team. It's like you have to have the team is one of the questions that I asked the audience. We have a pyramid that described you've got like the executives, the PMs, and the team. And I asked if you could only pick one, what is the most important, right? And it's by far the team. The team is what gets the work done, and they're the ones that will lead your project team to success.
Okay. I usually ask my interview guests here at the Congress the question of, after everybody's got up and left, what is the one thing that you hope they're taking with them? In your case, was it the team, or was it something else that you hope, this is the one nugget of wisdom I want to impart on you?
Certainly the team. I think it's more of one of the questions that I asked them early on was I put them under duress when I asked them about, and I'll maybe, if you don't mind, I'll go into a little detail on this. Really, one of the first questions I asked the audience is if your family was abducted by terrorists and they were held hostage, and the room got very quiet, right? That was...
Yes, I just made a face.
Yeah. And if they were told that they could have them all back safely if they could run their project in half the time, how many thought that they could do it? And that was like one of the first questions out of the gate.
100% probably, right?
Just about all, right? And then the follow-up question is maybe the question that answers your question about, and that's this. I asked them, so given the fact that your work breakdown structure and your project plan knows nothing of your duress, for those of us that raised our hands, myself included, why aren't we doing it in half the time now? And so that was the question that I wanted to probe them and lead them through the whole discussion. And that is really the question that I asked at the end. Again, it's just like, so now that you've thought about all this and you've seen these techniques, the question is, your laptop and your WBS know nothing of your duress. So how much faster can you go? Yeah. And it's kind of a mindset. And that's one of the key points.
Yeah. So let me try to rephrase this. You're saying this can be done faster. I've just shown you a presentation. I've shown you this can be done faster. Why aren't you doing it?
It's maybe not asking why aren't you doing it, but can you consider it? Can you think about it? It's not directing them, but more just making them think about it, perhaps.
What would your recommendation be to our listeners who haven't really seen your full presentation? How can they take first steps toward going to breathtaking speeds on their projects?
I think it starts with planning. It really does. One of my former mentors always said, good projects don't just happen, they're planned. And it starts with planning, because until you have a plan and you know what you're doing, it's hard to track and know how you're doing and how to compress it to go even faster. If you don't have all the facts down there, it will be hard to get there.
All right, Doug, thank you so much for your time today.
It was my pleasure, Cornelius. Thank you so much for having me on your show.